Hey everybody, this is Kathleen Moss, and you're listening to A Breast Cancer Diary. Those of you listening on the day that this episode is released, happy Easter to you, if you celebrate Easter. I'm just here again, just me, reflecting on some of the things we talked about in the last episode with my guest, Heather Jose. Her episode was packed full of controversial issues, and I'm just going to cover a couple of them today. And also wanted to give you a heads up that I may not be putting out episodes in the next couple of weeks. I've had a couple of guests cancel and have to reschedule, and then my dad just passed away this last week, and so I'm not able to reschedule with them soon. I do still intend to put out maybe 3 or 4 more episodes before I take a break for the summer, though, so I will be back at some point, probably in May and not in April. But don't worry, I haven't finished this season quite yet. So just to get back to last week's episode and some of the topics discussed with Heather, I wanted to talk about her complementary or integrative approach to her oncology. The fact that she worked in tandem with both the conventional system and the lifestyle medicine system. This can be really confusing for folks who aren't familiar with the world of functional medicine or even naturopaths. There are so many different types of cancer experts, so-called experts, in the world, and some of them are highly, board certified and backed up with lots and lots of education, and others of them may not be. All of them claim to have some interest in some kind of research, or usually they do, but not all of them have really solid research behind their practices. And so this can be really confusing and really expensive and kind of scary for the typical patient to explore. I have a background personally. I'm a functional nutritionist, so I have a lot of experience with telling these kinds of schools of thought apart. And unfortunately, in cancer, there's a lot of quackery. I think there always has been throughout history with cancer. There's a lot of people making false claims or really, really naive claims without a lot of research behind them. And this movie that we talked about, that Heather and I were talking about briefly in the last episode, that just came out on Netflix recently, called Apple Cider Vinegar, is a really good example of a couple of different really scary elements in this kind of shady practice. In the movie Apple Cider Vinegar, which I'm not sure if you'll be able to watch as a cancer patient, for me, it was excruciating. It took me a couple of months to get through this very short series of episodes because it was just so painful and uncomfortable and cringy for me to watch. Just a really unfortunate story that seems to be somewhat true, that takes place in Australia. But there were 2 elements that were disturbing. One was that this one character in the film, which the film kind of was focused on, was completely lying. She was a sociopath and coming up with dietary measures for people to fix or cure their cancer through, as someone who had never had cancer and was claiming to have cured her own cancer that really never existed. Of course, that is a bizarre and disturbing story to watch for anyone. But then there were a couple of other characters in the movie that were kind of carrying on a claim for themselves, and they did have cancer. They were looking into all the alternative to conventional medicine options that were out there in the world. There were things in Mexico and South America and different indigenous practices, and I didn't go into all the details of all of them, but the really poignant part of the story was the death of one woman who became kind of a thought leader and influencer of other cancer patients, and all the while her cancer had been progressing and she was denying that. And it's a really good wake-up call for those who are seeking the alternative kind of solution to cancer in our world right now. I think we need to have that kind of sobering reality brought to us every once in a while. And yet, people like my guest, Heather Jose, do feel like lifestyle changes, diet and exercise and stress related and sleep related changes in their lifestyle have made all the difference. So there is something to the lifestyle end of things. And I think for me anyway, in my research and my exploration, I have found that functional medicine is the best kind of mediator of the two, of natural and integrative and complementary medicine approach to cancer, as well as conventional medical, because most functional doctors are actually MDs. They are fully trained in the conventional system, and then they go beyond that to get trained in the lifestyle medicine, complementary or integrative, depending on what label you want to choose. And the difference is that they look for the root cause. So they're going back to the origins of the disease, which only makes perfect sense to you if you're a scientist. Like it would make sense to most people who are scientifically minded. And Dr. Block, my impression is when Heather went to Dr. Block in Illinois, that he is one of those functional type doctors. He is an MD, so he's certainly a full-fledged oncologist, but he's also looking into some of the other ways to complement that with natural and lifestyle approaches. And I'm really hoping myself that he does not get shoved under the bus as we're watching films like Apple Cider Vinegar, because there are very few people like him that bridge that nicely, that really embrace both sides of the continuum. And I think that is where the most hope lies personally. I've talked a little bit about my enthusiasm for exercise oncology. As a nutritionist, I have seen literature across the board with nutrition, and it is really messy. It's really hard to establish whether or not food can be the reason for certain outcomes, positive outcomes, and lowered risk when it comes to cancer, because food is just really hard to isolate in our, study of our habits. It's not something you can crystallize down to one behavior well, the way that science kind of needs us to do. But exercise and sleep and stress are much easier to get crystallized down to a single behavior or outcome. So I have a lot more confidence as a nutritionist, even as much as I've studied and as much as I do believe in nutrition. I have more confidence in exercise and stress reduction. We're just still learning about everything. We're so young in the world of science, and that's why it breaks my heart that so much science is being dismantled right now with our current political situation. But I just wanted to clarify kind of how I separate out these things. And I just wanted to say again how blown away I am that Heather is out there sharing her story every week. Just the salt of the earth, the most down-to-earth human being, not making any wild claims. She's the opposite of these personalities that you see in the Netflix series Apple Cider Vinegar, where they're just so confident about the reason that they supposedly got better, which neither of them did. Whereas Heather has stayed cancer progression free as a stage 4 patient, which is remarkable. It's not unheard of. There are other women like her who've lived 20 or 30 extra years with stage 4 cancer without any extra meds, even like her not having a whole lot of lifestyle inhibition by the drugs that she takes. But that is pretty rare. And I just love that she's sharing incrementally how she's doing week by week and staying on with her kind of regime of strict lifestyle habits with diet and exercise and stress reduction and sleep habits to increase the quality of her sleep. So I love having her in the cancer community at large, not just breast cancer, but the larger cancer community, because I think she gives people hope. And one of the things that Heather and I talked about was the placebo effect, the fact that patients do better when they believe they're doing something themselves that makes a positive difference. And I think this is true with any patient taking just about any drug. The drug is so much more powerful when we believe that it's making a difference. But it also can be true of our lifestyle choices, our dietary habits, our sleep choices, our stress management, our exercise habits, all of those things. If we believe they're making a difference, that makes our body all the more powerful somehow in some magical way that we don't understand and that science can't really capture. But it's called the placebo effect. And Heather was saying that she's a big fan and believer in that, in mindset. And mindset is not just a hocus pocus, belief in something that's false, but it's a belief that the small things that you're doing, even though you can admit that they're small, make a big difference. And so I think this is a great reminder to all of us to choose something, whether it's green tea, like her first oncologist told her to go out and start drinking green tea, and then we'll talk about getting rid of this cancer next week. Whatever it is, eating more vegetables, eating more fruits, eating more whole foods and less dirty meats and dairy products, maybe. I would just encourage you to choose some small thing that you can do that you've decided is warranted, whether it's something you've read or a doctor's told you. Do some small thing, not believing that it's going to cure you or make everything get better, but that it will make a difference. And feeling empowered in that process, I think, makes a huge difference for all of us. There is one other movie that just came out on Netflix that I was thinking about talking about because I just saw it today. Having just lost my dad, I'm really interested in some of the choices that we make around the time of death. And one of the things I want to do sometime in the next year is to take a course on end-of-life doula, end-of-life planning, because I have friends that have been diagnosed with stage 4 and I want to help them, people like Danielle, that I would like to help plan the last days and weeks and months of their life. I feel equipped to do that. And so I'm always interested in movies that talk about death and that explore and watch death. And few movies do this very well. Like my friend Christine Handy was saying in my interview with her, most movies about cancer patients will show them getting sick and then dying immediately. And boom, that's the end of the movie, or that's the end of that scene or that person's character role in whatever story it is. They don't really address it. They don't stretch it out and watch it because it's uncomfortable. It's painful to watch. And this movie that just came out on Netflix called The Room Next Door with Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton is a really good example of that. It's not a comfortable movie to watch. It is the least entertaining movie that you've probably ever seen. It's an awkward, drawn out movie with lots of silent parts and hesitations, which as Americans we're pretty uncomfortable with, I think. But if you're interested in the subject of death and especially euthanasia, I think that it's a really interesting movie to watch. As a cancer patient, I think we can be less afraid of recurrence or stage 4 diagnoses if we are willing to ask some of the harder questions about what we would do if we were diagnosed and if we were facing death. And I think this movie in particular really addresses it well. But I just think it's really freeing to give yourself the permission to explore these kinds of options when you're thinking about death and cancer, especially those of us who have already had cancer once. I think it gives death less of a sting. It makes it less of a threat or less scary of a topic to think about if we can think about all of the options, all of the ways that we can deal with the pain or not deal with the pain. With my dad having passed away just a few days ago, I really faced this myself in terms of just being really insistent that he not be given measures to prolong his life. He was already psychologically suffering from dementia, and it was really important to us as a family not to prolong that suffering. And yet, in the moment, you always feel a little bit strange telling a doctor that. The doctor we were dealing with was really great at supporting us through that decision and not making it awkward. But it's really good to practice in terms of, I got to practice with my mom and now I've gotten to practice with my dad. And that makes me more ready to be able to make those kinds of decisions, awkward as they are, socially hard as they are for myself at some point. So if you're interested in those topics, if it's not too scary for you, if you're in a good space, not too stressed out by the political situation right now, then you might check out that movie on Netflix just as an educational opportunity. I just love Julianne Moore. She really takes on roles that explore these bold subjects a lot. So I appreciate her work in that respect. So I will probably be away for a couple of weeks dealing with my family business. And if you'd like to be in touch with me, I am on Substack. That's the best way to hear from me every week. And my Substack is called abreastcancerdiary.substack.com. You can either subscribe through email, or if you get the app, you can subscribe on the app and then check it out on the app and not get an email. And I will talk to you soon. Take care, friends.